I've covered this before, it bears repeating. So here's the Japanese forces basically at the end of the war. And I'm going to go back here so you can see this map better. But there was a whole lot of forces that there was never a battle for. Now, if you look at everything that was on, there was no battle for Taiwan. Ever. They pulled out of there. Several things contributed to the end of World War II. The fact that the Soviet Union declared war also at the same time contributed heavily. But I'm going to post to you, and you can really check this out, and do your own homework on this. But so there was if you watch the what happened on the Missouri, it's there are no generals or admirals there. It's just three business guys, and they go to meet MacArthur on the deck of the Missouri, and they sign a bunch of papers, and then he doesn't say it's the end of the war, he says it's the end of the hostilities. Well, if you look over his shoulder, there's a flag that doesn't have the correct amount of stars. Now that flag is still hanging behind on the Missouri in where its permanent home now is in there in Hawaii, in Pearl Harbor. But there was a deal cut. It was an end of hostilities, but it really wasn't the end of the war. They had to pull out without causing damage, because remember, Mao Zedong was now fighting against the Nationals. So the emperor spoke Mandarin. He was also a scientist. So the deal was cut that he could keep his money and keep his power. They had to pull out of everywhere and hold the peace, and we promised to rebuild Japan, because we wanted to rebuild Japan and make sure that they didn't rise up again in this. So they cut the deal. It really wasn't the end of the war. There was actually a couple of Japanese sympathizers that lived in Peru that helped a couple of Japanese submarines. They were still sinking a few ships here and there for about a year afterwards. So anyway, all these troops had to give up. They had to come back to Japan. It was a temporary peace. It was an end of hostilities. There was no fight for Taiwan. So when the Nationals finally got pushed off of China, they went to Formosa, which is Taiwan. And so if you look in when ships are taken out of service, sometimes they go into a mothball fleet, and they have the mothball fleet set at separate areas. So you can have where they can bring it up within 6 weeks, 10 weeks, a year, and then there's some that they use just for target practice. But there was at least 12 ships that were never accounted for in the inventory, and I believe that they were melted down and given to the new Japanese industry to make Toyotas. If your parents had a Toyota back in the 70s, chances are it was made out of steel from a couple of the pocket carriers that went off the books. And so yeah, and there's a kind of an interesting guy on the internet who worked at the Presidio, and he was a librarian there, and he had to redact basically everything at the Presidio to destroy stuff that the Presidio was basically the Area 51 of the last century. Like from everything that happened in the Pacific went through the Presidio, and the Presidio was actually the place where the UN actually started before they moved to New York. But anyway, his name is Douglas Dietrich, spelled like Diet Rich. And if you want to check out, he's got some interesting takes on how World War II ended. But anyway, another thing I want to point out, the Chinese never gave the technology to the Koreans on making a nuclear bomb. However, the Japanese were working on a nuclear bomb too, and they were working on it on the Korean Peninsula. Now they had put dams on the Chosin River and the two other rivers next to it to generate the electricity for the uranium enrichment. And so as the Soviets came in, the Japanese hastily retreated. They blew up and buried the stuff. Well, the Chinese never gave the bomb technology to the Kim Jong-un, or his father Kim Il-sung, or none of them got the technology from China. They dug up the Japanese. So remember, the Japanese controlled Korea for 10 years before there was an outbreak of the war in the Pacific, maybe 12. And that was their little fun area. So they dug up that and just took it a step further. And then, they got stuff off the black market and everything. But that's where their nuclear technology came from. Anyway, subscribe and share this. And I've got a website, timbosplace.com, if you'd like to check out more. Thank you.